Welcome to video 2 of chapter 2, Research Methods. In this video, we're going to talk about the different measurements of behavior. So this class, again, we're really focusing on learning and behavior, so how behaviors develop. So in order to understand how behaviors develop, we of course have to then understand how to measure behaviors, how to describe behavior. So the first step is behavioral definitions. When you're describing behaviors, there's two things you need to keep in mind. You need to be objective, so you can't put your previous biases or ideas on anything. And you also have to be unambiguous. You need to state things very straightforward, easy for everyone to understand. These are the two main things you need to keep in mind. So here's an example that one of my profs when I was in undergrad had us do. So there's a picture on the left side of this slide. It's kind of a 4-step process of a behavior happening. Now what I want you guys to do is take a minute, describe the behavior. Look at what's happening. Tell me kind of step by step exactly what behavior is happening. You don't need to tell me why it's happening. We don't know that. Just tell me what is happening. So I'd say pause here, take a few minutes, describe it, and then come back. Okay, so I hope you all did that. Now I'm going to do a behavioral definition of what we see. So really compare how well you did to what I did. Now, there can be different definitions. Just because yours doesn't match mine doesn't mean that yours is wrong. But what we really want is you want to make sure that you're being objective and you're being unambiguous, that you're being very clear. So starting in this first position here, then it looks like we have a bird, possibly a goose, sitting on the ground, eyeing an egg. In B, then we have the goose stands up and approaches the egg with its beak by extending its neck. In C, the bird now moves its beak around the egg. It appears as though the bird is scooping the egg closer to its body by bringing its neck in. And then here in 4, we can see that the bird is bringing that egg in closer to the other eggs that it has. Okay, so you hear how my description, I wasn't putting too much ideas forward. I'm just explaining exactly what's happening. Bird stands up, extends its neck to the egg, investigates the egg, positions itself to then bring the egg forward or towards itself, and then continues to do so until the egg is underneath it. Now I'm just observing things that are going on in these pictures. Okay, so that's what a behavioral definition should be, is you're just looking at something and you're describing what's happening in a very clear way. So really practice this. If you didn't do it before, you can go watch a dog or a squirrel or something outside and just sit and then try describing the behavior. So that's how we describe behavior, but how do we record the methods? How do we record what's happening? So there's actually 9 different recording methods that behaviorists use to measure behavior. So we're going to go through each of these methods one by one. I don't have a lot of text on my slides because it's really all about examples. So again, for each of these, a great question that I might have asked if we had a reading comprehension quiz would be, pick 3 recording methods and give me an original example. That's all you got to do. So a great study tip here would be go through each of these 9 and create your own example. So up first, we've got the rate of response. So when recording behavior, then a lot of times we'll just rate the responses. So this is really just counting the response to a defined behavior. So when we are doing this rate of response, we're really just counting the number of times a behavior happens. There's a clear start and end time. So say during class time, you could do how many times your instructor, say me, says a certain word. And you can just make a nice little tick mark every time your professor says a word. And your clear start and finish time would be the start of class to the end of class. Very simple. That's your rate of response. To then measure the rate of response, then there is this really cool device that's been made called the cumulative recorder. And it's really just a fancy way of counting the rate of response for you. It's really just a very long scroll of paper that slowly moves along. And then every time a behavior happens, then the pen that's on the roller will make a little tick. So that's what these little ticks are. And every time it makes a tick, it'll then slowly move up 1. Make a tick, move up 1. Make a tick, move up 1. So the further apart you're responding is, the flatter your curve, or between the different ticks. But then the quicker the responses are to each other, the steeper you're going to have on that curve. So it's really just a way of looking at not only the number of responses, but kind of how are those responses related to each other? Was it slow responding, rapid responding, that kind of thing. Now up next, we've got intensity. So when you're measuring intensity, you're measuring the magnitude of behavior. You're measuring the force of the behavior. So, I love cats, so I put this great meme. But it's kind of true. Like, if your behavior is breathing, you can measure the intensity of their breathing. Are they breathing really heavily, or are they breathing nice and slow and shallow? That's a different intensity. You can also look at the intensity of, say, writing. Is someone writing very soft on a paper, or are they pushing down hard with that pen? That's a different intensity of behavior. Up next, we've got duration, again with my love of cats. So duration is really just the length of time. So how long does someone do something? So you're not picking a start and end time. You're just watching someone do something. And you're like, how long did they do it for? And so, for instance, if I'm sitting in the park and I see a squirrel run on the ground, then I can measure how long the squirrel was on the ground. That's the duration. Very simple. Up next, we've got the speed. So the speed is a little different than duration. So your speed is how fast you do something from start to finish. So in this case, there is a start point and an end point that's pre-established. So for instance, how fast does it take you to do a maze? So from the time you start the maze to end the maze, and then that time in between would be your speed. I personally love doing puzzles. So how fast does it take me to do a puzzle? That would be my speed. But if we talk about, okay, what if I, just love to do puzzles and there's puzzles all around me, and one day I sit down and I do a puzzle for a bit and then I leave. So how long did I do a puzzle yesterday? I didn't start and finish the puzzle. I just did part of the puzzle. So the duration of time I spent on the puzzle would be one time, but then the speed of the puzzle would be how long it took me from start to finish. Okay? Up next, we've got the latency. So this is how long before the behavior starts. So, for instance, a great one that we sometimes do in psychology is we'll have students come and we'll measure, say, their reaction time. So, how long it takes for them to respond to something. So, we'll flash a letter on the screen, or say, we'll flash the letter M on the screen. And then what they have to do is they have to press the letter M on their keyboard. And so what we're measuring is the amount of time between the letter flashing on the screen and the time that they press the letter M. So that time in between the stimulus and the response is that latency. So how long before a behavior starts? Okay, now these next two are going to be related to each other and maybe a little tricky to tell the difference between. So up first, we've got interval recording. So interval recording is where you're recording behavior. You're just recording if a behavior occurs during a certain amount of time. So for instance, here we have between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m., we're seeing, does a behavior occur? But instead of just doing one time, we're going to look at it in 1 hour chunks. So between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, did the behavior occur? Yes or no? Between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, did the behavior occur? 3 and 4, did it occur? And that kind of thing. So one thing you could do here would be interval of recording of, did someone pick their nose? I don't know. Or did someone go to the bathroom? So you're not measuring how often they went to the bathroom or how often or the number of times they picked their nose. You're just saying, did they pick their nose between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock? Between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock? So it's kind of a yes-no during each of these intervals. Okay? Now, related to interval recording is time sample recording. So rather than a continuous time chunk, so like a full hour and then a full hour, then we're sampling the time. So here, this is our time, and I'm going to draw on our screen here and say this is an hour, this is an hour, this is an hour. So here, this amount of time, that's 1 hour. This is another hour. This is another hour. And this is another hour. So we have 4 hours here. And so with interval recording, you sit there for the full hour and see if a behavior occurs. And then you sit here for a full hour, see if it occurs. So you're pretty much sitting there for 4 full hours looking at, does the behavior occur? Now with time sample recording, you might not have time for that. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in for the first 10 minutes of the hour. So from 1 o'clock to 1:10, you're going to go in and look, does the behavior occur? And then you're going to leave. And then at 2 o'clock until 2:10, you're going to go in again and say, did it occur? So you're sampling during that time. Okay? So if you're doing, let's say, pick your nose. So if I pick my nose between 1 and 1:10, you're going to notice. But if I pick my nose at 1:15, you're not going to be there anymore. So this one, you might put a no, even though the behavior occurred here. But you're not going to know that because you weren't there. Whereas with interval recording, you would know that because you were there the whole time. Okay, so that's kind of a pro and con to interval recording versus time sample recording. So interval recording, you don't have a chance to miss a behavior, but it's a lot more of a time commitment. Whereas with time sample recording, you don't have to be there the whole time. It takes a lot less effort, but you might miss the behavior. Okay. Now, up next, we've got topography. topography. So this is really just a description of the physical form of behavior. So this is really just you telling me how a behavior is done. Okay? So for example, this is just terrifying to me. I would never do it. But a lot of people, or there's like this cool thing where people will skydive and then like connect and make a giant skydiving chain. Terrifying. But that's a behavior. So a topographical description of the behavior would be you telling me how they do this. So do they all jump out at once? Do they jump out of the same plane? Do they hold hands while jumping out? Or do they hold hands later? How do they, get towards each other? All of that. So that's you just straight up with your words describing how a behavior is done. Very simple. But sometimes that's really the best method for measuring a behavior. Or for understanding a behavior, especially understanding how learning happens, is just describing it. Now, the last measure of behaviors that we're going to talk about is the number of errors. And so here, you're not measuring every time they do a behavior. You're not measuring the speed or anything. You're looking at how many times did they attempt to do something and messed up before they did it right. So with this picture example, it took, they have 3 errors before he successfully hammered this nail home. I don't even know how he does number 2. Really seems like they need to learn how to use a hammer because it shouldn't be this hard. But the first time didn't go straight, second time didn't go straight, third time didn't go straight, fourth time they did it right. So it took 4 times to get this behavior right. So what we're measuring is how many times a subject did something wrong before doing the correct behavior. Okay? Again, they should be pretty straightforward. You should be able to come up with great examples. So say I give you guys the midterm. I'm not going to do this, but say I give you guys the midterm and you all fail. So I give it to you a second time, exact same questions. Next time, 50% fail. Give it to you a third time, finally everyone passes. So the number of errors there would be 2. It took you guys 3 times to successfully all pass the midterm. But you're doing the exact same thing. I'm not giving you a new midterm. I'm giving you the exact same one. So you guys would be answering the exact same questions, but it takes you a few tries to get it right. Okay, so that's really what that number of errors measurement is looking at, is how long did it take for it to get right. Now, one other thing we need to take into account when talking about our measurements of behavior is the reliability of our measures. So how accurate are we measuring? So your textbook doesn't talk about validity, but I want to talk about it as well, because I think reliability and validity go hand in hand. They're very much related. So reliability is really just making sure that every time you measure the same thing, it ends up the same measurement. So for instance, if I'm measuring the length of my cell phone with one ruler, if I measure the length with a different ruler, I should end up with about the same measurement, right? And that would mean that the rulers have good reliability, that they are measuring what they said they're going to measure, that they have the measurements they say they have, that 1 centimeter is a centimeter. That's reliability. So here in this first example, so it's like targets, say you shooting practice, paintball practice, arrows, what have you, spitballs, I don't know. Good reliability, you can see how all of the shots end up in about the same spot. So that's good reliability. However, what you were aiming for was the center. And so whether you're actually measuring like what you wanted to measure is your validity. So if I measure the amount of time it takes someone to finish a maze and I call that duration, is that right? Well, no, that's the speed. So I'm not measuring what I said I was measuring. So that's not good validity. So this first example, we've got good reliability. We're hitting about the same place every time, but we're not hitting where we wanted to. Now in this second one, then we have not very good reliability. You can see we're hitting just all over the place. But if you average out these dots, they average out to the middle. So on average, we're hitting the middle, even though we never actually did. But on average, you're hitting the middle. So you're measuring what you said you're measuring, but not well. Every time you measure it, you get something completely different. And so that's not good reliability. This one is just neither reliable nor valid, so you hit a different place every time, and at no time does it average out to the middle. And then this last target is what we're always aiming for, where we have good reliability, we're hitting in about the same spot every time, and we're hitting where we aimed. We're measuring what we want to measure. So this is both good reliability and good validity. Now your textbook also talks about inter-observer reliability. So this is just talking about making sure that when you measure something, between subjects, you're measuring it the same way every time. So, for instance, when I grade exams, I need to make sure that when I'm grading essay exams, that I'm looking for the exact same thing every time. And I'm not just grading it how I feel all willy-nilly. That would not be good reliability. So that's why instructors use a rubric, so that I'm looking for specific things, and either you have it or you don't. And that way, when I look through all the different exams, I'm grading it the exact same way. Okay? And inter-observer is making sure that if you have multiple observers or multiple graders, they're all grading it the exact same way. So if I have a TA, then I need to make sure that they're grading the exams the exact same that I am. So that, like, say, you know, maybe I'm a harsh grader and they're more lenient. Well, that's not fair then to the different students. So you need to make sure that we're all grading it the exact same way and we're following the same rubric. And therefore, when you mark our little grades out, they're all nice and clumped together, and we have good reliability between the different observers. Okay, so that's it for part 2 of our chapter 2. We just have 1, maybe 2 more videos left for chapter